Jacob Hartwell watched her from the Pine Ridge, a woman in a worn coat, dragging timber twice her weight across frozen ground, alone in a world that had forgotten kindness. He'd ridden past every morning for 2 weeks, and every morning his chest tightened with something he'd buried alongside his wife. The woman below worked without pause, notching logs with practiced hands, her breath forming clouds in November cold. No neighbors came, no help arrived, just her and the half-built cabin frame rising against a Montana sky. Memories struck him like a fist. Margaret had wanted to build a home together. They'd talked about it the winter before the fever took her. He'd never done it. Now, he watched the stranger accomplish what he couldn't. The woman, Sarah Brennan, the town whispered, stopped to warm her hands by a small fire. Her face caught the light. Young, determined, carved by hardship into something fiercer than pretty. Jacob knew that look. He'd seen it in his mirror 2 years ago, before grief had worn all expression away. Why was she alone? The question gnawed at him. Women didn't build cabins single-handed in Montana territory. Not unless something had gone terribly wrong. His horse shifted beneath him. Restless, Jacob tightened the rez. Torn between riding down and riding away, guilt weared with curiosity. Margaret's memory felt like a wall between him and the living world, and watching the stranger felt like betrayal. But he'd be back tomorrow. The watching had become ritual, his only emotional tether to anything beyond the emptiness. Sarah looked up suddenly, directly at the ridge. Their eyes met across 200 yards of grassland. For one breathless moment, neither moved. Then Jacob pulled his horse back into shadow and disappeared into the pines below. Sarah returned to her work, but her hand shook slightly as she lifted the next log. 3 days later, the storm came. Sarah hammered canvas over exposed walls as snow began to fall. Fat flakes that promised a long night. Wind picked up, tearing at the tarp. She was losing the race against weather, and panic edged into her movements. Hoof beatots! She spun, reaching for the rifle propped against the cabin frame. A man emerged from the white curtain of snow, the watcher from the ridge, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. He dismounted without asking permission and began unloading. Nails, rope, heavy canvas, dried beef wrapped in burlap. Sarah raised a rifle. I don't need charity. Not charity. His voice was rough from disuse. Neighborly sense. Storm will rip that canvas clean off by midnight. And what's your price, neighbor? He looked at her then. Really? Looked, and she saw something in his eyes that made her finger ease off the trigger. Loneliness recognized itself. Just let me work. She lowered the rifle, but kept it close. They worked in tense silence as the storm built around them. He moved with quiet competence, securing tarps with practiced knots, reinforcing weak points she'd missed. Snow accumulated on his hat brim. He didn't speak again. By full dark, the cabin was battened down. Groaning but holding against the wind, he tied off the last rope and walked his horse without a word. Wait, Sarah called. He turned. Who are you? Jacob Hartwell. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell. He nodded once and rode into the blizzard. Sarah stood in her partially protected cabin, listening to the storm rage, confused and unsettled by the stranger who'd help without asking for anything in return. In her experience, men always wanted something. She whispered to the empty space. Why would you help me? Nobody helps me. At his ranch, Jacob unsaddled his horse with numb fingers. His foreman, old Moses, watched from the barn door. Boss, you almost smiled just now. Jacob didn't answer, but Moses was right. He'd spoken more words to that woman than to anyone in 6 months. Sunday morning at Timber Creek Church was cold in more ways than one. Jacob sat in his usual back pew, staring at the Reverend without hearing the words. His mind was on Willow Creek, on canvas tarps and a woman's suspicious eyes. Sarah Brennan entered late. The congregation noticed 40 heads turning as one, whispers rippling like wind through wheat. She took the only available seat. Front row, isolated. Clara Whitfield, the town matriarch, leaned toward her daughter and spoke just loud enough to carry. Some women have no shame building homes in isolation like that. What kind of decent woman lives alone? The sermon droned on about righteousness and community. Jacob barely listened. His thoughts had traveled backward to 2 years ago. Margaret dying of fever in their bedroom. Their unborn child lost with her. He delayed writing for the doctor, thinking she'd improve. She didn't. He blamed himself ever since. Guilt had become armor, keeping the world at a safe distance. His ranch was successful, but empty, a monument of loneliness that everyone respected and no one questioned. After the service, Clara Whitfield positioned herself near the church steps like a spider in a web. Sarah walked past with her head high. Ignoring the pointed looks, Jacob made his decision. He crossed the churchyard and nodded to Sarah, a simple acknowledgement, but witnessed by everyone. Clara's voice rang out. "Strange company you're keeping, Jacob Hartwell." The congregation waited. Jacob faced a fork in his road. Retreat to safe isolation or step forward into risk. He chose risk. "Miss Brennan." He tipped his hat. "Mr. Hartwell." Her voice was steady, but surprise flickered in her eyes. "Storm didn't take your walls down." "No, it didn't. Thank you." That afternoon, Jacob rode to Willow Creek. Not to the ridge, but directly to the cabin. Sarah watched him approach. He dismounted, picked up a saw from her tool pile, and met her eyes. "If you'll have the help, I'll help you build." Sarah studied him for a long moment, weighing risks and trust. Finally, she nodded once. "Then you better know how to notch timber properly." The distance between them closed. 2 weeks passed. The cabin took shape. They developed a rhythm. Jacob arrived at dawn, worked until dark, spoke little but accomplished much. Walls rose. Roof frame took form. The work was hard and good, and Jacob felt something in his chest loosen, something that had been clenched tight since Margaret died. Sarah learned fast. He taught her proper notching techniques, how to read with grain, where to place support beams. Their hands touched briefly, passing tools. A charge moment both noticed, neither acknowledged. Evening meals by firelight became ritual. Conversations remained sparse, but weighted with meaning. "Your husband built before?" Jacob asked one night. "Ben." "No, he was a ranch hand. Died in a range dispute last year." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact. Town blamed him as a troublemaker. "I inherited the shame." Jacob nodded, understanding more than she'd said. "Town's good at blame," he said quietly. The next morning, they discovered half Sarah's timber pile had been stolen overnight. Winter which she couldn't afford to lose. Sarah's face went pale with rage and fear. "I'll find it," Jacob said. "It's not I'll find it." He tracked the thieves to a drifter camp 5 miles out. 3 men, drunk and careless. Jacob recovered every log and delivered a warning cold enough to freeze blood. When he returned the wood to Sarah's property, she was waiting. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said, "I did." That night, Jacob dreamed of Margaret. He woke feeling guilty, was helping Sarah, betraying his wife's memory. Next morning, he arrived at Willow Creek, distant and quiet. Sarah noticed immediately. She set down her hammer and looked at him. Grief isn't betrayal. "Jacob, the dead don't want us dead, too." Her words cracked something in his chest. He nodded, unable to speak, and returned to work with new intensity, building not just a cabin, but something within himself. The blizzard hit without warning. One moment they were working the roof frame. The next, the world disappeared into white. Temperature plummeted. Wind howled like a living thing. Inside, Jacob shouted. They sealed themselves in a half-finished cabin, canvas walls, gaps in the roof, the small stove barely adequate against the cold. The storm raged for 2 days. Proximity forced vulnerability. They shared a single wool blanket by the stove, shoulders touching, watching firelight dance on incomplete walls. "Tell me about him," Jacob said. "Your husband." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Ben was flawed, quick temper, poor judgment sometimes, but kind. "He loved me in his way." She paused. "I loved him, but he's gone. I'm still here, still living. No idealization, just truth." "Your wife?" Sarah asked. Jacob stared into the flames. "Margaret fever took her, and our baby 2 years back. I waited too long to ride for the doctor. Thought she'd improve." His voice cracked. I watched her die. I've been watching life ever since. Watching you build. Watching from that ridge. Because maybe I'm only good at watching. Sarah turned to face him. Then stop watching and start living. The words hung between them like a dare. Jacob looked at her, really looked, and saw someone as broken and brave as himself. He kissed her, tentative, terrified, real. Sarah froze for a heartbeat, then returned it. The cabin around them was unfinished. Wind howling through gaps, but warmth existed here beyond the stove. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Morning came clear and bright. The storm had passed. They worked differently now, synchronized, aware of each other in new ways, careful not to name what had shifted. At noon, Moses arrived on horseback checking on Jacob. His knowing look said everything. Boss Town's talking. Clara Whitfield's got her claws out. Jacob's stomach sank. His horse had been spotted at Sarah's property overnight. Innocent explanations wouldn't matter to people hungry for scandal. Let them talk, Sarah said firmly. But Jacob's silence spoke louder than her defiance. The town council convened publicly 1 week later. Unusual, theatrical, orchestrated by Clara Whitfield. Jacob stood in the town square, surrounded by familiar faces now cold with judgment. Rancher Vernon Nash stood beside Clara, smirking. He wanted Sarah's land since Ben died. Clara's voice rang clear. We're concerned, Jacob, about your association with certain individuals. This community has standards. Sarah Brennan is a respectable widow, Jacob said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm helping a neighbor. Helping? Vernon Nash laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Jacob felt the weight of 2 years' respectability pressing down his position, his reputation, the town's approval he'd never questioned. He hesitated, searching for stronger words. And in that hesitation, everything crumbled. Sarah stood 30 feet away, half hidden by the mercantile doorway. She'd come to town for supplies and heard everything. She heard him choose their approval over defending her. Without a word, she mounted her horse and rode away. Jacob saw her go, recognized his failure, and felt something die inside him, something that had just started to live again. He tried to follow. Sarah refused to see him. You chose their approval, she said to the cabin door, voice flat. I chose myself. We're done. Jacob, leave. That afternoon, Vernon Nash filed a legal claim against Sarah's property, citing incomplete residence and Ben's. Unpaid debts. The deadline. Finish the cabin and prove occupancy in 2 weeks or lose the land. At his ranch, Jacob sat alone with a whiskey bottle. Moses watched from across the room. You spent 2 years dead, boss, the old foreman said quietly. She woke you up. Now you're choosing the grave again. Jacob didn't answer. He had no answer. 10 days passed. Sarah worked alone, injured from a saw slip, cabin still incomplete. Exhaustion carved shadows under her eyes. The dream of home was slipping through her fingers. Jacob spiraled. Work, whiskey, isolation. His ranch thrived. He felt nothing. Moses tried again over breakfast. Margaret would be ashamed of you right now. Not for moving on, for giving up. The words landed like a blow. That afternoon, Jacob rode to the cemetery. He stood at Margaret's headstone, snow falling around him, and spoke aloud the truth he'd avoided. I loved you, Maggie. I'll always love you. His voice broke, but I'm still alive and I've been choosing wrong, choosing fear, choosing death. He touched the cold stone. She makes me feel alive, and I think you'd want that from me. Permission granted to himself from himself. Honoring Margaret meant living fully, not dying slowly. Jacob rode straight to town. He found the council in the saloon and slammed Vernon's fraudulent papers on the bar. This claim is built on lies, Jacob said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ben Brennan's debts were paid. I have the receipts. Vernon wants her land, not justice. Clara Whitfield rose. This isn't about land. It's about cruelty. Jacob interrupted, dressed up as righteousness. Sarah Brennan is worth 10 of you. Clara, she's braver, kinder, stronger than anyone in this room. He looked around at familiar faces. You want to judge her? Judge me alongside her. I stand with Sarah Brennan. The room divided before his eyes. Clara's faction remained hostile, but others, younger families, the blacksmith, several ranchers shifted. Respect for courage outweighed appetite for scandal. Moses stepped forward. "I'll help finish that cabin." "Me, too," said the blacksmith. Others joined. At dawn, Jacob led a dozen men to Willow Creek. Sarah met them, rifle ready, confused. Jacob dismounted and met her eyes. "I was a coward. I'm here now. All of us. Let us help you build." Sarah looked at him, at the men behind him, weighing trust against fear. Finally, she nodded once. "Then pick up a hammer." 3 days of hard work transformed Willow Creek. The community that showed up wasn't the whole town, but it was the better half. Walls rose in coordinated effort. Roof secured, door hung, floor laid. The cabin became real, solid, sturdy home. Laughter rang out. Shared meals, collective pride, Western communal spirit reclaimed from judgment. Sarah and Jacob worked side by side. Few words, but constant awareness, trust, rebuilding through action, one log at a time. On the third afternoon, Vernon Nash arrived with 4 hired men. He carried papers and wore a gun. "This property's under dispute," Vernon announced. "You're all trespassing." The work stopped. Men reached for tools that could become weapons. Jacob stepped forward, Moses beside him. "The only trespasser here is you, Vernon." Vernon's hand moved toward his gun. Tension peaked, violence one heartbeat away. Sarah walked the line of defenders, deed in hand, and faced Vernon directly. "This is my home," she said, voice steady as stone. "I'm not leaving, and you're trespassing." The completed cabin stood behind her. Proof of residence, proof of community, proof of will, stronger than greed. The sheriff, who'd been watching from his horse, finally spoke. "She's right. Vernon Council reviewed your claim yesterday. Denied. You've got no business here." Vernon looked at the unified faces around him and saw he'd lost. He mounted his horse, face twisted with humiliation. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes," Jacob said quietly. "It is." Vernon rode away. The helpers departed as evening fell, leaving Sarah and Jacob alone in the completed cabin. Lantern light warmed the log walls. The small space felt enormous with possibility. "I don't know how to do this," Jacob said. "I'm still scared." "So am I," Sarah replied. "But we build it one day at a time, like the cabin." He took her hand. She didn't pull away. They stood in their completed work. Not just timber and nails, but trust and second chances made tangible. Jacob pulled her close and kissed her. No hesitation this time. No fear. Outside, the first stars appeared. Inside, a home began. Spring arrived like a promise kept. Sarah stood at the cabin door at dawn, coffee cup warming her hands. 3 months had passed. The cabin had evolved. Small garden planted, corral built for Jacob's horse, curtains and windows, signs of 2 lives merging into one. Moses and the ranch hands came for Sunday supper, now found family forming around the couple. Laughter replacing the silence that had defined Jacob's life for so long. That morning they walked to church together. Sarah's hand in Jacob's, both ready to face whatever came. Some glares remained. Clara's faction smaller now. Bitter but irrelevant. Younger families greeted them warmly. The town was learning. Acceptance wasn't complete, but it was growing. After the service, they rode back to Willow Creek in comfortable quiet. On the porch that evening, they talked of the future, expanding the cabin, adding a room. Maybe children someday, building forward, not just surviving. "You ever regret it?" Jacob asked. "The hard way?" Sarah smiled. "Every good thing worth having comes the hard way." She watched him work the corral in the fading light. He looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. Rare, genuine. The smile of a man who'd learned to live again. She smiled back. The cabin stood solid against the Montana sky. Wildflowers bloomed where winter frost had ruled. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of home into the evening air. She had built her cabin one log at a time. Each piece laid with stubborn hope against a world that wanted her to fail. He had built his courage the same way, one choice at a time, until fear became just another ghost laid to rest. Together they built a home, not from timber and nails alone, but from the heart of materials. Trust earned through action, second chances given and taken, and a quiet belief that even broken hearts can learn to beat again. Spring rain began, soft, renewing. They stood together in the doorway, watching the land come alive. Home. Word count 3.